Chapter 1. The expedition. Elias hadn't come to the desert alone. His team consisted of 5 members, each chosen for their expertise. There was Sarah, the linguist who could decipher ancient languages; Karim, the historian with encyclopedic knowledge of ancient civilizations; Lena, the geologist who could read the desert's secrets in its layers of sand; Victor, the engineer who could build anything from whatever was at hand; and Amina, the photographer who documented everything with an almost supernatural eye for detail. They had arrived at the ruins a week ago, funded by a mysterious consortium that demanded results but refused to reveal its motives. The ruins were vast, a labyrinth of collapsed temples and sand-covered streets, but the Sphinx was the heart, the point around which all their maps and theories revolved. Elias had insisted they begin by examining her base, where inscriptions were said to be hidden beneath centuries of sand. But from the first day, something felt wrong. Tools went missing, shadows moved in the corner of their eyes, and the night was filled with sounds that couldn't be explained, as if the desert itself was breathing. "It's just the wind," Victor had said with a laugh, but his eyes betrayed an uncertainty absent the day before. Sarah found the first inscriptions, carved into a stone buried at the Sphinx's paws. They were written in a language unlike anything she had seen before, but she managed to decipher one line: "He who seeks the truth must sacrifice what is precious." She read it aloud, and the group fell silent. Sacrifice. What did that mean? That night, Elias dreamed of the Sphinx. In the dream, she was not stone, but flesh and blood, her lion's body sleek and deadly, her human face twisted in a mocking smile. She spoke to him, her voice an echo in an empty tomb. What is it that lives without breathing, sees without eyes, speaks without a mouth? Elias woke with a scream, his clothes drenched in sweat. He couldn't shake the feeling that the riddle wasn't a question, but a warning. The next day, the problems began in earnest. Lena reported that the ground around the Sphinx was unstable, as if something was moving beneath the surface. Karim found an ancient text describing a ritual linked to the Sphinx, one that required blood to awaken the keeper. Amina, usually the most grounded of the group, began taking photos that showed strange shadows, shapes that couldn't be explained by the light or the ruins' contours. And Elias heard the whispers again, clearer now, as if the Sphinx was speaking directly to his soul. "We should leave this place," Lena said one evening by the campfire. Her voice trembled. "It feels like we're not welcome." But Elias refused. He had dedicated his life to finding the Sphinx, to solving her riddles. He couldn't give up now, not when they were so close. That night, Victor disappeared. Chapter 2. The disappearance. The morning after Victor's disappearance was chaotic. The team searched the camp and the ruins, but there was no trace of him, no footprints, no equipment, nothing to suggest he had even left his sleeping bag. It was as if the desert had swallowed him. Amina reviewed her photos from the night and found something that made her face pale. In one image, taken in the dark near the Sphinx, a blurry figure was visible, not human, not animal, but something in between. "It's probably just a reflection," she said, but her voice carried no conviction. Elias tried to keep the group together, but fear was spreading like an infection. Karim became obsessed with deciphering more inscriptions, convinced the answer lay in the ancient texts. He found a passage describing the Sphinx as a gatekeeper to another world, a world where time and space didn't exist in the same way. But the text also warned, he who enters without solving the riddle becomes part of her. Karim read it aloud, and Sarah glanced at the Sphinx, as if expecting the statue to move. "We have to solve the riddle," Elias said. He couldn't explain why, but he felt the Sphinx's voice in his dreams was tied to Victor's disappearance. He repeated the riddle aloud. "What is it that lives without breathing, sees without eyes, speaks without a mouth?" The team tried to analyze it. Sarah suggested it might be a god, but no god in the ancient texts fit the description. Lena thought it could be a metaphor for the wind, but that felt too simple. Amina said nothing, but her gaze was fixed on the Sphinx, as if she saw something the others missed. That day, the ground began to shake. It wasn't an earthquake, but something more organic, as if something alive was moving beneath the sand. Lena set up her seismic sensors, but the results were incomprehensible. The vibrations didn't come from any known geological activity. "It's like something's trying to break through," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Night fell, and with it came a cold that had no natural explanation. The team gathered in the camp, but no one could sleep. They heard sounds now, not just whispers, but footsteps, as if something large and heavy was moving in the dark. Elias shone a flashlight at the Sphinx. Her eyes glowed, but it wasn't a reflection of the light. It was something else, something from within. Then they heard Victor's voice. It came from the Sphinx, faint but clear. "Help me, she has me." Elias ran toward the statue, but when he reached it, the voice was gone. The sand at the Sphinx's base was undisturbed, but when he touched the stone, he felt a pulse, as if it were alive. "We can't stay here," Sarah said, her voice filled with panic, but Elias shook his head. "We have to solve the riddle. It's the only way to get Victor back." Chapter 3. The Riddle. The team spent the next day digging around the Sphinx's base, hoping to find more clues. They uncovered a chamber, hidden beneath the sand, its walls covered in inscriptions. Karim translated them feverishly, his hands trembling with exhaustion and fear. The texts told of an ancient priestess who had tried to challenge the Sphinx and paid the price. Her soul, it said, had been bound to the keeper, whatever that meant. Elias couldn't stop thinking about the riddle. What is it that lives without breathing, sees without eyes, speaks without a mouth? He began to suspect the answer wasn't something physical, but something more metaphysical. A soul, a demon, but none of the theories felt right. Meanwhile, Amina's photos grew increasingly disturbing. In one, the Sphinx appeared to have wings, though the statue had none. In another, it looked as if her mouth was moving. That night, the unthinkable happened. Lena disappeared. Just like Victor, there were no traces, no explanation. But this time, they heard her scream, a heart-wrenching sound that echoed through the ruins before falling silent. Elias felt panic threatening to overwhelm him. He couldn't lose anyone else. He gathered the remaining members, Sarah, Karim, and Amina, and insisted they solve the riddle now. "It's a dream," Sarah said suddenly. "The answer is a dream. In a dream, you live without breathing, see without eyes, speak without a mouth." It sounded logical, but when Elias repeated the answer aloud, nothing happened. The Sphinx's eyes glowed brighter, and the voice in his head laughed. Wrong. The ground shook again, more violently now. The sand around the Sphinx began to shift, as if something massive was trying to break free. Amina pointed to her camera. Look, on the screen, the Sphinx was visible, but her face was no longer static. It was Lena's face, twisted in pain. "We have to go into the chamber," Elias said. It was their only chance. They grabbed flashlights and ropes and climbed down into the dark opening beneath the Sphinx. Inside, the air was thick, as if filled with something invisible but alive. The walls were covered in reliefs depicting the Sphinx, but in each image she looked different, sometimes with wings, sometimes with a serpent's tail, sometimes with human hands holding hearts. In the center of the chamber stood a pedestal with a new inscription: "He who solves the riddle will be free. He who fails will be mine." Elias felt fear grip him, but he couldn't back down now. He repeated the riddle again, and this time he answered, "A soul." The Sphinx's voice echoed in the chamber. Wrong. The floor began to shake, and the walls seemed to move, as if the chamber itself was alive. Sarah screamed as a crack opened beneath her feet, and before anyone could react, she was gone. Chapter 4. The Sacrifice. Now there were only 3, Elias, Karim, and Amina. The chamber felt like a tomb, and the air was so heavy it was hard to breathe. Elias couldn't stop thinking about the words in the inscription. Sacrifice what is precious. What did it mean? Their lives, their souls, or something else? Karim was losing his mind. He muttered to himself, repeating fragments of the ancient texts. "She's not just a statue," he said. "She's a jailer. She's keeping something trapped, and we've awakened it." Amina, who had been silent until now, held up her camera. "Look at this." The image showed the Sphinx, but now her face was Elias' own. "It's not real," he said, but his voice trembled. He could feel the Sphinx's presence now, not just in his mind, but in his entire body. Her voice whispered again. "What is it that lives without breathing, sees without eyes, speaks without a mouth?" Elias shouted the answer, "God." but the voice only laughed. Wrong. The ground shook so violently they could barely stand. A crack opened in the chamber's ceiling, and sand began to pour in. Karim threw himself at the pedestal and started pounding on it, as if he could destroy the Sphinx from within. "We have to stop her," he screamed. But before Elias could stop him, Karim was swallowed by the sand, his screams echoing in the dark. Now it was just Elias and Amina. "We can't win," she said, her voice hollow. "She's toying with us." But Elias refused to give up. He pulled out Karim's notes and began reading. There was something about a sacrifice, not of life, but of truth. The Sphinx wanted something precious to them, something they kept hidden. Elias realized what it was. He had carried a secret for years, something he had never told anyone. He had caused a colleague's death during a previous expedition, a mistake he had hidden to protect his reputation. Perhaps that was what the Sphinx wanted, his guilt, his truth. He stood before the pedestal and began to speak. He told everything about the mistake, the lies, the pain he had carried. When he finished, he felt relief, but also a coldness spreading through his body. The Sphinx's voice spoke, "Correct answer, but the price is not yet paid." Amina screamed as the sand began to move again. Elias turned and saw her sinking, her hands reaching for him. He tried to pull her up, but the sand was like a living thing, and she was gone. Chapter 5. The Sphinx's secret. Elias was alone now. The chamber was silent, but the silence was worse than the screams. He could feel the Sphinx's presence everywhere, as if she was the air he breathed, the walls surrounding him. He had answered the riddle, but it wasn't enough. What did she want? He returned to the pedestal and read the inscription again. "He who solves the riddle will be free. He who fails will be mine." But there was another line, half erased by time. "He who sacrifices himself opens the gate." Elias understood now. The Sphinx didn't just want his truth, she wanted him. He heard her voice again, clearer than ever. "What is it that lives without breathing, sees without eyes, speaks without a mouth?" He had tried everything, dreams, souls, gods, but now he realized the answer. It was her, the Sphinx herself. She was the answer to her own riddle. Elias shouted the answer, "You, the Sphinx." The chamber shook, and a light began to stream from the pedestal. A door opened in the wall, a portal pulsing with an unearthly light. Elias felt his body being pulled toward it, as if the Sphinx was calling him. He tried to resist, but it was impossible. He stepped through. On the other side was a world of darkness and stars, a place where time and space didn't exist. The Sphinx stood there, no longer stone but flesh and blood, her eyes glowing like suns. "You have solved my riddle," she said, "but freedom comes at a price." Elias saw shadows moving around him, Victor, Lena, Sarah, Karim, Amina. Their faces were blank, their eyes glowing like the Sphinx's. "They are mine now," she said, "and you will be mine too." Elias screamed, but there was no one to hear him. He felt his body dissolve, his soul bound to the Sphinx. He had sought the truth, but instead he had found her. Epilogue. The secret of the sand. The ruins lay silent again, as if nothing had happened. The Sphinx gazed out over the desert, her smile unchanged. The expedition was gone, their equipment buried beneath the sand. But if one stood close enough, they could hear the whispers, the voices of those who had tried to challenge the keeper. One evening, a new traveler arrived, a young woman with a notebook and a dream of uncovering the Sphinx's secrets. She placed her hand on the stone and heard the voice. "What do you seek, mortal?" She smiled. She was ready.